I know a lot about computers, how to keep them safe, how to find their weaknesses, how to explain the weaknesses without exploiting the weaknesses. That's the ethical hacker. We don't exploit the weaknesses. So without further ado, let's move on. Talk about the agenda. I agree to what, and we'll see that's actually my favorite slide of the whole deck. Talking about social networking, end user license agreement, or just called a EULA, secure your internet site, outsourcing site access. I want you to pay particular attention when we get there that this is the first of all the presentations I've done across the country. This is the first time I've actually had a slide with no words on it. So look for that one to come. In fact, Lauren was thumbing through the deck and I stopped her. She looked at me and I said, you gotta wait. Talk about Gmail, and I think I should preface it, and these opinions are my own. Is anyone here working for Google is going to get mad at me. Protecting sensitive data, online data storage, the hack-proof computer, myth or reality. We'll talk about that. And at the very end, I'll open up to questions. So without further ado, now how's that? The slide with the devil. And I said I agreed to what? And this actually happened back in 2010. It was an April Fool's joke. The company was GameStation. They were based in the United Kingdom. They put a EULA, or end user license agreement, basically said that they could email you and with a 5-day written notice claim your immortal soul. And did people click on it? Thousands clicked on it to sell their soul to download a DVD. What I love about that April Fool's joke was, with almost unearthly clarity, it demonstrated people are not reading end-user license agreements when they hit, sure, I agree, you betcha, sign me up. I agree to what? To sell my soul? But that's what they were agreeing to. And I found that to be probably one of the best, at least in my field, April Fool's jokes I've ever seen. So that was great. It made actually international news because they're based in the UK and they got press in Europe and here in the States. So, and it was huge letters too. It wasn't like a little fine print. It was, "We will take your soul." Okay, fine, take my soul. Okay, social networking. A very effective tool. Social networking sites can be very effective if done correctly. I mean, you can get the word out, you can market, you can advertise, and we all know this. What you don't want to do is post sensitive information online. If you don't want it public, if you don't want it for all the world to see, if you don't want it for everyone who has internet access to see, don't post it online. A common mistake that I see different companies say, well, I'm not a bank, I'm not a hospital, I'm not a credit card processing company. You'll fill in the blank. Do I have sensitive data? Odds are you do. For example, and I broke it down in some categories. Regulated data. Do you collect health insurance? Do you provide your employees with health insurance? You have HIPAA data, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. If you have employees and you collect taxes and for those employees and keep records, you have their social security number. That's regulated data. I guarantee you have employee files, or when you hire and you get a resume or they come close, you might have a name and date of birth. That's another interesting aspect of this field. One data element by itself may be totally public. For example, a date of birth. By itself, it's a date on a calendar. Right? January 1st, 1970, if I say that's my date of birth, which it's not. That's just a date on a calendar. It's public. Married with my name, paired, all of a sudden it becomes confidential data, sensitive data, and I know I'm moving off my platform. 46 states have data breach disclosure laws that say if you collect sensitive data and you do not protect it in a way that is deemed reasonable by the individual states, and you have an actual or suspected breach, you must disclose. You must disclose publicly. You might have to go to a city official. You might have to put it in the paper. You may have to contact your customers. You may have to provide identity theft protection. It can get very expensive. There's a company called the Ponemon Institute. They do a study every year. They said the approximate cost per record of a data breach. Now, the numbers have gone up and down a little bit over the years, but you're pretty close to $200 per record. So what would losing 1,000 records mean to your bottom line? At $200 per. It adds up very quickly. And it goes beyond regulated data that would require a breach notification. Do you have sensitive data? And sensitive could be your client list, your customer list, that's sensitive to you. Your strategic business plan, or I call your secret sauce, right? Your intellectual property. I'm going to do a shout out to Mary and track it. Okay? TrackLight. Okay. There are things out there that if they became public knowledge, if you lost control and it's on Facebook, you accidentally emailed it through Gmail, we'll talk more about that later. If that is your business model, your intellectual property, your next invention, and it's gone, or it's your client list, your strategic business plan, and it's gone, does that mean you close your doors? I do, in addition to the speaking I do consulting with companies of various sizes, both public and private sector. And a lot of times I hear, this is my business model, this is how I make money, this is how I am better than my competition, this is what sets me apart. If I lose it, I am done. How do I protect it? And we go through the architecture and everything else of how to put strong protections around it. And obviously it's, please don't put it on Facebook. Please don't put that on Google Docs. That's a mess. End user license agreement, or a EULA. What I recommend is you strike a balance. Have one, you want to protect your rights as a company, and we all have, we should be able to do that. We should be able to protect ourselves legally. That have a privacy statement, a privacy policy, or a EULA, end user license agreement, that is in our best interest. But you can do it in a way that also respects your customer. Now, I'm going to, kind of do both sides of what I see, both sides of that fence. We have Facebook and Instagram. Both have gotten a lot of bad press lately for what we call disrespectful or even borderline abusive privacy policies. We can use, like Instagram. You post a photo, we can use it. We can sell it, we can make money off it, we don't need your permission, we're not going to share any money, it's ours. Facebook was the same thing. Photos, videos, intellectual, anything you post, they said they owned. Now it's funny, the example I gave 3 years ago, it showed no one was reading these. It's starting to get a little traction and starting to get a little bad press that when it goes totally overboard, you will make the news in a bad way. What I found interesting about Facebook, I've been checking their privacy policy of various sites on a recurring basis. They've tightened it up somewhat, but then again, at the risk of quoting an older site or one of my former slides, the devil's in the details. They said, yeah, we won't share your data with outside companies. It's just companies we're affiliated with. That's a pretty big hole to drive a truck through. So while maybe on paper they've put some restrictions around it, I still don't see that as really respecting your privacy. And then I look at companies like LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, I'll say it, and they won't share. They don't. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use due care with what you post on there. It is open to the internet. So, post on there what you want freely shared with the internet. But what they say is they're not going to turn around, mine your data, and try to sell it to other companies. So I see that as a level of respect for the customer. And they are targeting a different audience than a Facebook or an Instagram. They're targeting professionals to link together. Another thing I ask people, and it does vary on your business model, is part of your business model, are you selling trust in your brand? Are you selling respect for your customer and their privacy? If you are, then there's a competitive business advantage to this. I've worked with companies who they sell identity theft protection, they sell credit card protection, different types of things. I said, if the customers can't trust you, they won't do business with you, because by nature they have to hand over all of their sensitive information to you. If they think you're going to sell it, If they think you're not going to protect it, they think you're going to slap it on Facebook, you're done. Secure your internet site. Okay. Who here has an internet site? Hernan's going to watch me wave my, says, I better raise my hand. Okay. Who knows what SSL is? Okay. If your customers log in, I highly recommend you use SSL. Basically, without going too deep into the technical weeds, it encrypts the data as in transit from your computer to the server you're logging into. Because as you're going over the internet, anyone and their brother can see it. I say the internet is, the bastion of 6 billion potential hackers worldwide. And one of the things I find, on the one hand, the internet is the greatest recent invention of mankind for the sharing of information and knowledge. On the other hand, how many hackers, in this country we look at a hacker as a criminal. And if you get caught, there are serious felony, implications to being a hacker here in the United States. There are foreign countries where you're seen as an agent of the government. So you have no fear of repercussions. You can hack, and it is your job title is to hack. So, well, I tell people, encrypt, if you want people to log into your site with a username and password, encrypt that. That's where the SSL comes in. And different type of thing, a username and password, I talk about that. Do you have an account lockout for failed login attempts? Say my login ID is Phil, my password is Alexander, which it's not. Okay, am I going to keep trying to copy in Alexander and misspelling it? Are you going to lock me out for failed login attempts? Are you going to require a certain type of password complexity? Now, on a standard keyboard, there are what's called 4 elements of complexity: a lowercase letter, an uppercase letter, a number, and then a special character. An industry standard is, or something common in industry, is minimum of 8 and 3 or 4 complexity. And they ask about that, and are there variations? Sure there are. It should be appropriate to the data you're protecting. You also look at the impact to your customer base and what is their tolerance. What is their expectation? Expectation is going to be higher if I'm logging into my bank account. I don't want a 4-word password and then do my banking. I expect my bank, wherever I bank at, to have a higher threshold than that. Different people's, there's also an argument to clearing the account name for failed attempt. So if I type in Phil and misspell Alexander and hit enter, it clears both. Now, there's a value to that. There are actually many programs, unfortunately, freely available on the internet to launch what's called a brute force or a dictionary-style attack. Basically, I look at a site with a login, put in the username, and just hit go, and this program will go to town on you. And if you don't lock me out, it'll hit thousands of combinations, and eventually it'll guess it. So that's where having an account lockout, that's where clearing a username for a failed attempt, making the user type in Phil again in my case, would help block something like that. And then there's different ways to unlock a locked account. I can, I'm trying to log in. I say, hey, Hernan, I locked myself out. You can send me if I register either my phone number on my cell phone or my email address, I can be sent an unlock code. Okay, type this in, try again, or type this in, here's a new password, but you got to send a new password. I obviously forgot it, so get a new password. Some, and this was very popular, but now there's going to be a flaw in this because it's doing with social networking sites. I locked myself out. Okay, well, answer what's called an out-of-wallet question. You would have submitted these before when establishing your account. Name of my first cat was. I was born in what city? My first car was this. My oldest son is this old. Is this old? I was married in this year. The thought is, it's personal to you. It's not in your wallet. That's why it's sometimes called an out-of-wallet question. Only you know it. It's hard to guess, so it's a high security. There's a flaw in that logic now. People are going on Facebook saying, I was born in this city, the name of my first pet is this, my first car was this, I bought it in this year, I was married this year. Basically, they're putting all the information to the out-of-wallet questions on Facebook, and people are getting that. So now I go, okay, well, I'm trying to hack into someone's account. I'm going to go on Facebook. That's your outlawed question. Let's see if they post it on there. So I can't impress enough. If you are using outlawed questions for yourself, for your own, for accounts that you have online, don't post your secret answers on social networking sites. What we're trying to do here is, stop identity theft, obviously financial fraud, and even cyber stalking. There are people just, I emphasize, and I can't say this enough, because I do a lot of talk with like schools and religious organizations, talking with minors. Do not, under any circumstances, meet someone in real life or meet someone for real that you don't know in real life. You only know online. Cyber stalking is real, and it's, unfortunately, there are predators out there who, at that point, stealing your Facebook account's the least of the worries. It's, hey, they'll target, a teenager, let's meet at the mall, and they think they're meeting a 13-year-old boy or girl like they are, and it's a predator. So, that's where, this becomes, very real. One of the stories I heard on the news 2 days ago I found fascinating. Talk about scams and putting a lot of personal information on social networking sites. I'm sure all of us have seen like fortune tellers, almost like telephone gypsies, call, and for $1 a minute, 50 cents a minute, what have you, I will tell your future. And you call them, you're amazed how much they know about you. They must be, truly have the gift. Or, you know where I'm going with this, they don't have the gift. They're searching your Facebook page and go, oh, well, you were born in this town, you went to this high school, you married this person, your first boyfriend was this, and wow. So it's not that they're psychic, they're trolling through your social networking sites. This, of all the presentations I've ever done, except for the one that shows the devil, I love this slide. Except for the title, it's just pictures and images, no typed words. Outsourcing site access. Now, I just got done saying, you're using SSL, protect the username and password. Someone's logging in. You're going to require a complex password. You're going to lock someone out after a certain number of failed login attempts. You're trying to, thwart the brute force attack against your site, against your customer to protect them. All well and good. And then you outsource to a Facebook, a Twitter, a Google, or an Instagram. What these symbols mean on a site when you log in is, well, you can log into my site directly, or you can log in, use one of these, and totally bypass any security I set up. What I found interesting, a lot of people are doing this. I guess if it's logging in, I've seen this from one internet email to another, and you own them both, maybe, because you can almost argue one they're both internet email sites. I've seen them where you're actually, like, for example, one is Netflix. I'm sure everyone's heard of Netflix, right? You can buy videos, get them delivered to your house, DVDs. You can also watch Netflix live online. You pay a monthly subscription, which means what? They have your credit card information. I was very surprised to see that Netflix allows you to log in using Facebook. So if you think your that's why I try to tell people, your Facebook username and login is important, because people can use that to go to see what other sites you're in, and now I can log in as you. I can try to get your credit card information through these other sites. I tell people, data breaches can be devastating. Devastating in cost, devastating in brand. So I want to give a shout out to Jim and Vero. A lot of the laws of the various states will say if you have a breach, you must provide 1 year of credit monitoring for safety. So what do the bad guys do? Okay, fine. You're going to watch me for a year? Great. I'm going to steal your data, and I'm going to sit tight for a year. Then I'm going to town on you, because then the credit monitoring has expired. So what you need to do, and what Jim's company has done, is go beyond the year. Go to 5 years. And that's then you're doing some protection. It could be for yourself, your family. And that's another thing about, and I'm going to talk about your product a lot, that I liked. There are a lot of companies, no one can say you'll never be hacked. there's just too much out there to say never. But I've seen a lot of companies, and they'll say, well, we'll protect you and your spouse. Okay, that's great. What about my kids? Now, my minor children don't have, you could argue, well, they don't have a checking account or savings account, especially if they're 5, 6 years old. They probably don't have a credit card at that young age. What's their risk? What happens when they reach 18, apply for a credit card or try to get a student loan, and their credit score is in the 200s because their ID was stolen 10 years ago and they've been victimized for a decade and no one's known? Because they don't, they're not going to get the credit card account, the bills. They're not going to get anything. But yet, and that's why, unfortunately, for a lot of these identity thieves, they are targeting minors, well, and seniors too, unfortunately. So looking at the whole family does provide a more comprehensive approach. Gmail, your email, excuse me, and those of your customers are scanned for marketing purposes. That is almost a direct quote from their site. I tell people, and I laugh, I was in the Army for 6 years, and I knew even back then, I said, 20 years later, my knees are not going to like what I was doing back then. I was right. They don't. Well, if I want the name of a good orthopedic surgeon, the only thing I got to do is hop on a Gmail account, email someone that my knees hurt, and I'll start getting emails back, and advertisement back for orthopedic surgeons. That's how aggressively they're scanning your emails in Gmail. What I find now, so for one, my recommendation, especially at a business level, because I think it has a better image, is to have your own email domain, something like I have at dataprivacynetwork.com. Another thing I find interesting, and especially being in this field for 25 years, both on the private and public sector side, Microsoft was not known for their robust security in the old days. The old days, 80s and even the early to mid 90s. They weren't, you really didn't, when you're looking at robust, hard security, really tight, Microsoft was not really the first name you went to. But they started in recent years what I maybe call getting religion. And one of the things I found really interesting is now they have Outlook.com. They basically took, their Hotmail, if you have a Hotmail account, and now it's Outlook. Okay, so it's their brand. And one of the things they say, and I love this, it says, don't get Scroogled. They don't scan your emails, try to get information, and then start marketing to you. I mean, are they going to put little banners on your email page? Sure they are. That's how they make money. But they have in their privacy policy, which I see as a sign of respect, that they don't scan you. They don't read your emails. And they recognize that having that level of respect is going to provide them a business advantage. A lot of people like myself, I mean, it's almost part of our lexicon. Google this, right, to look something up on the internet. I'm starting to not Google it so much. I'm starting to Bing it more. Bing, another search engine. It's not that necessarily the results are noticeably superior that I've seen. I just find it as a sign of disrespect that everything I type, they're looking at. I find that disrespectful. And I'm a privacy guy, so it bothers me. So like I said, so Microsoft recognizes that there's a value in respecting people's privacy. Protecting sensitive data. Well, for one thing, we need to identify, what data is sensitive. Not every piece of information floating around your computer, your servers, flying in your network, on your laptop, even on a thumb drive for that matter, is going to be sensitive. Not everything's created equal. One thing I recommend is having classifications. You don't want to spend precious time and resources, for example, encrypting brochures that you want the world to see. Right? You may put it in a PDF where they can't alter it, that's fine, but you want people to see it, so don't put your hardest controls around there. Now, for example, your executive salaries, sure. I mean, I love that commercial where the guy's recycling, and someone looks back, executive salaries, and the boss dives across the table to grab it. Okay, so yeah, different types of data require different levels of protection. The greater the value of the asset, the more protection you should put around it. Another thing I hear, and the joke was, if you ask 10 professionals, data security professionals, what data is confidential, you'll get 11 different answers. That's a consistency. So you need to set up for yourself, with guidelines, from if you're in a particular industry, like there's HIPAA, there's PCI, the credit card industry, there are books to help you out. Another thing I tell people, don't leave it up to your employees to guess. If you have a document, if you have your business plan that is very sensitive, and you say you don't email this outside the company, period, then at the bottom, confidential, do not email, not to leave the company, or do not copy, whatever. Whatever makes provides a level of security for your sensitive information that you don't want. Sometimes it's done with the best of intentions. Yeah, I know I'm working. My boss is going to get mad because I'm not done. It's Friday. I'm going to email it to my home account, working on the weekend. Problem. I just sent a very sensitive document over the internet to my Gmail account, and now what is supposed to be very secret information for the company is now known internet-wide. That's the problem. There are software packages that can protect documents. There are packages that do a secure shred, basically a secure delete, versus a native delete that's native to an operating system. In fact, one of the things on the ethical hacker side, and especially the forensics examiner side, there are software packages that can look at a hard drive, what's called a bit level. Okay, a bit's a 1 or a 0. Okay, can look at it bit by bit. You think you deleted something, you did not. You make it non-searchable, but it's still there. Okay, and that can be easily recovered with forensic tools. So there are things out there that have a higher level, a more permanent delete. Okay, is it 100%? Probably not. I'm not a real big believer in 100%. But it'll, like the casual. Here's an example I give. People always ask me, I want to be 100%. I said, I have 2 cars in a parking lot, same make and model. One car, my doors are locked, the windows are up, and I have a club on the wheel. Another car right next to it, the door is unlocked, and the keys are on the driver's seat. Now, they both can be stolen, but one's a lot easier. It takes a lot less effort for me, and I get the same outcome. I get the stolen car. So a lot of times, it's the easy target. So I always tell people, don't make yourself the easy target. A lot of documents let you password protect them. So if someone does inadvertently email it and it gets into the wrong hands, at least that's a level of protection for you. And encrypting documents. There are applications out there you can encrypt parts of a hard drive, you can encrypt the whole hard drive. Depending on the value, like I've said several times, the level of protection needs to be appropriate to the value of the asset to you. Wireless. I mentioned Starbucks. How many people have done wireless at Starbucks? How many people have done wireless? Any here traveling executives, traveling salespeople? Okay. If I were a hacker, I would hang out at airports because their Wi-Fi is right open. If I were a hacker, I would hang out at hotels. Okay. I'm not saying don't use it because you need to stay connected, but there are things you can do to help protect yourself. One, if you have your own wireless network, WPA2 is just a fancy word for the most current, the strongest encryption algorithm to protect wireless data in transit. Now, a lot of modern equipment have built-in wireless technology capability, and properly configured. Okay, you're your own Wi-Fi, so you're paying a little more because you're not hitting off of the Starbucks or the airport, but at least your data is protected. Excuse me. There's also something I call MiFi. There are devices where basically you can be your own mobile hotspot. I've seen traveling teams of executives or traveling teams of salespeople, and you need 3, 4, 5 people on at the same time. So you have this little wireless, it's an external device, and you can set, okay, only people I know, because you need a password to get on. It's encrypted. So now it's wireless, so we're mobile. We're still mobile. We're still able to get what we need done at sites where we can't, plug into a network. But our data is secure. Online document storage. Cost effective? You bet. Are there security implications? I think so. In fact, sometimes one of my frustrations or challenges is someone will say, oh, we're using Google Docs, we're using Dropbox, and here's the information. Please don't. Especially when it's my family, don't do that. And I have a lot of explaining, here's what you can do, here's how I can hurt, here's how people can hurt you, and everything else. So now, am I saying don't use a Dropbox or Google Docs? No, I'm not. If it's public data. If you put it on there knowing, you don't have an expectation of security, an expectation of privacy. If you want a solution, and I'm going to give another shout out, like a TrackLight and a collaborative vault, then it is encrypted. So I'm not saying you shouldn't take advantage of an online storage solution because it allows for collaboration, especially if you're spread across the country. It's great. It adds a lot of flexibility and functionality. But consider the protection of the data. One of the discussions I had with a school administrator, and I might not make the advisory board that I applied for after this conversation with them. However, they said, oh, we use Google Docs. No data, and the data's not sensitive. I go, really? What do you put up there? Name, address, phone number, email. Really? Wow. You know how much damage I can do with that information to you? And of minors, you know how much damage I can do? You know how much liability as an institution you have on yourself? They're actually, one of the states that has its own data breach law is actually considering making an email address a standalone data element that if breached, you must disclose. Because there are actually programs online where I can take your email address, do a search, and it'll tell me every place that you have an account tied to your email address. And that's the start of my hacking you. That's a start of doing identity theft, account takeover, financial fraud, and it's as simple as an email address. I mean, I always tell people, take that computer knowledge and get a real job. That's what I did. Rather than sitting in my basement hacking everyone, I got a real job. So, that's me. So. Hack proof, myth or reality. I believe there's a balance between functionality and security. And like I said, you need to balance the level of controls, the potential risk, the potential exposure, and the value of your assets. If something's internet aware, that's your highest risk level, of course, because you have your audience of, your intimate audience of 6 billion people. Whether it's on your internal network, whether it's in what's called a DMZ, and people from the outside can see it. So there are different levels, and there's different values of assets. And that's the strength of how you protect it. There was a saying that when the hard drive is spinning, the computer can be hacked. Of course, now we have solid-state hard drives, so I think that saying, I'm dating myself even using that. We came very close to what was considered a hack-proof system. It was actually used during World War II, and was used by the Germans. It had what's called a one-time PAP. It was a one-time use password to access. Yet it was used once, never again. Near impossible to hack. Then they started running out of resources and started reusing the one-time use passwords, and the Allies broke it. So it was close. That's probably one of the closest things to being truly hack-proof, and then it got misused. In fact, we always, for the technical and for the techies out here, in modern computers are called IP-based communication. It's called the 7 layers of open systems interconnectivity, or the OSI model, and there are 7 layers. And they always say, okay, Phil, what are the weakest layers of the OSI model? I go, layers 8 and 9 of the 7-layer system. And I said, please elaborate on that, bless you. And I said, layer 8 are people. Always the weakest link, always. Who here, most people know of RSA, security fob folks. Okay, I've heard of them. Okay, maybe it's, okay, I'm in the business. Okay, RSA, they sell the ID fobs, the tokens that the number changes. So it's a second factor authentication. About a year ago, they got hacked. Now, their firewalls were great. Their encryption, they were tight. Someone opened an email they shouldn't. The attachment opened up. Boom, they got hacked. Layer 8, people. That's how they got hacked. What's layer 9? Politics. I want to do this. I don't mean politics as, President Obama or Democrat versus, that's not the level of politics I'm talking about. I'm talking about the corporate politics. There are times in various jobs I've been in, I say, this is a risk. No, it's not, go away. And I've had to actually show, I said, do I have your permission to show you how it's a risk? Yes, show me. And I say, here's the information that I shouldn't be able to see. Oh. So a lot of times the risk, so the last layer, layer 9, is politics. One of the, in the computer realm, it's called CIA, and I don't mean the Central Intelligence Agency, I mean confidentiality, integrity, and availability. For the security folks out there, it's the CIA triad. The security people always know we are never, ever front burner when it comes to technology money, ever, and never will be. The money is always going to be to getting the computer network up in the first place and make sure it is up. If you're real secure but your customers can't hit your website, you're out of business. So of course availability is always going to be king, and confidence and integrity are always going to be back burner. So you need to make your arguments. But here, that's why I tell people, how many of us can afford a $250,000 fine because of a data breach, or a loss of customer confidence, or being watched by a government agency as part of the data breach incident and being audited for the next 5 years to make sure you clean up your shop? That's where the security folks earn their keep. Another thing I tell people, it doesn't have to be expensive either. I'm going to get my high horse here for a second. One of my taglines is security can be eloquent. Many people will say, well, I have firewalls, I have servers, I have this, I have that. Are using it to its highest level, to its best level, so you get the biggest bang for your buck, your return on your investment. I'll keep it real simple, then I'll move on. You have a firewall. Great. What are the firewalls like? I don't know. Is your firewall engineer just availability? Because if it is, I can write a rule that says let anything in. And it'll work great. Unfortunately, it's not a firewall anymore. It takes a level of expertise and knowledge and practice and diligence to only allow that traffic that is needed for the type of access to go back and forth. I've done a lot of audits, and I'll see, and it's called an any rule. Any port, any protocol, let it through. I'm like, you just wasted your money on whatever firewall you just bought. The last rule should always be a deny. That's what's not allowed, deny and block. And there are things like that. In fact, one of the books, for the home and small business, it's tips and tricks like that. A lot of us, unless you're a huge corporation, can't have the staff of security professionals at different areas of expertise. So make the most of what you have. And with modern equipment, you can actually have a fairly secure small network with the tools that you already have on hand. Okay. Now I'm going to say, so there's about me, Phil Alexander, founder of Data Privacy Network. They're all the alphabet letters next to my name. And there are ways to contact me.